So when my family first moved here to Colorado, we started a little bit of a family tradition. And every single year we go to the zoo lights thing that happens at the Denver Zoo. I don't know if anybody knows this. They kind of put lights all out. It's super festive. It's like a whole vibe. And so this last Christmas, I take the whole family out to the zoo light thing. And I'm telling you guys, I was father of the year during this whole thing, okay? I brought the hot chocolate. I had the blankets. We were pushing the kids around. It was so festive. It was just a whole vibe that night. And so we're driving home. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Not only that, we were able to jump onto that tollway that goes up right in the middle of I-25. You guys know that fast road you can get on? Now, what's so cool about that road is if you have 3 or more people in the car, it's free, which is why I had children, so I can get free tollway driving on I-25. So we're driving home. We got Christmas music playing. Christmas is in a couple days. I am feeling so good. You know, the whole family's in the car, and we're driving up this tollway, and I'm looking at all the losers on I-25 that don't have the toll pass. And then I see it in my rearview mirror. The red and blue lights. And I get pulled over, and this police officer, he was very kind, but apparently he did not know I was Pastor Brian Bigger from New Hills Church, because I got handed a ticket for speeding, and the whole vibe of the night changed right in that moment. I went from Father of the Year to convicted felon, just right in a moment. And as the officer's going away and we're in the car, my kid's first question was, "Dad, are you going to jail?" That was the first question. So we clarified that no, Dad is not going to jail. But then my son, he's like, "Dad, what is that?" I'm like, "Oh, I got a ticket, bud. I'm going to have to pay it." He said, "Well, how much is the ticket going to be?" I looked at it, so I'm like, "Oh, man, $95. And my son, without hesitation, says, "Are you kidding me? Do we even have that much money?" And my 7-year-old boy is already asking a question that we ask all the time. Is there enough? Is there going to be enough? Are we going to be able to make it? Think of all the questions that kind of bounce around in your mind at different points in your life. You have these moments where you're like, am I ever going to pay off the college loans? Like, it's been 10 years since I was in school, and I'm still making payments on that. Am I ever going to be able to afford a house in Colorado? Are we ever going to pay the credit cards down? Is there going to be enough? And we live in arguably the wealthiest nation in human history. And even though that's the case, there are so many people, even in our own country, who wrestle with this question every day. Is there enough? Are we going to have enough? Are we going to be able to make it? And if you missed out on this last week, we launched a whole new series we are calling Next Level. And the whole premise of this series is that there are levels to life. So all of us in here, you've gotten to different levels in your education, for example. There are different levels of athletics, everything from rec league to professional athlete. There's different levels to the house you own, the car you drive, the clothes you wear. We can go on and on. There's also levels to faith. And we've said that even though God loves everyone the same, there's no favoritism there, not everyone gets to the same levels spiritually. There are levels to accessing God's presence in your life. There's levels to experiencing His love and His work and His power. And God's heart and desire for you is that you would get to newer and greater levels in your own relationship with Him. But what we pointed out last week, just to catch everybody up, is we said that one of the greatest barriers to getting to the next level in our relationship with God is actually our relationship with money. We pointed out how this is often the final boss in so many of our lives because it has so much power. Jesus even said it comes with unique temptations that other things don't. And really, you just got to be honest, one of the reasons this is such a struggle is you need money to live, don't you? I mean, this is how you afford food. This is how you pay for your car. This is how you live in a house. If all of your money disappeared today, your life would get very complicated, wouldn't it? Things would really start to get messy for every single one of us, and this is why we worry. Because we think, oh man, is there going to be enough? Am I going to be able to retire one day? Is Social Security even going to be a thing by the time I retire? And what is even just like that line between good planning and saving and potentially hoarding or being greedy? And then add a whole nother level of complexity to this. Budgeting, investing, taxes, you think of trusts and wills and inheritance, and before you know it, this gets very complicated in our lives. And this is why last week we announced that in just a few weeks, we are making available a totally free class we are calling Next Level Freedom, 4 weeks to financial health. So for 4 Sundays, after our second service, we're going to make this class available. Free childcare. We'll have everything covered. Dan Morris, who is a fiduciary financial advisor we had a special connection with through High Point Financial, is going to be coming here teaching. He's going to be bringing his staff. There's going to be opportunities to text in questions, ask some questions. You can get everything you need. And I was so encouraged. I did not expect this, everybody. Just last week alone, over 138 people have already signed up for this thing. That's pretty amazing. So I hope this really helps a lot of people. And maybe this is going to be something that helps you too. So please use it. Also, we were leaning into this 1090 challenge, stepping out and trusting God to provide and take care of us. And I couldn't believe this either. Just last Sunday, I didn't even pitch it that hard. 32 people are already going on this journey with us as a church and seeing what God's going to do. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. But let's get back to this topic. I don't know a single person who has not worried or stressed about money at some point in their lives. Every single one of us feels this on some level. So the question is, what does God really have to say about this? How much should you actually worry? How stressed out should you be? Now, Jesus has one of his most famous one-liners from his teaching. And he says this in Luke 12. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. And if anybody has read this passage before, Jesus goes on to illustrations. He's like, hey, look at the birds. God feeds the birds. And then he's like, hey, look at the flowers. God even takes care of the flowers. So of course he's going to take care of you too. And Jesus goes on, he says, and don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, people who don't trust God, all over the world. But your Father already knows your needs. Look at this. He will give you everything you need. So Jesus makes this pretty clear. Like, he says that we have a promise, and it is this: God will provide. So you have a guarantee from Jesus himself. God's got you covered. You don't need to stress. You don't need to worry. So we should probably just wrap this up, right? So stop stressing out, okay? Just chill. Is it that simple? Well, what's really going on here? What is Jesus saying? And one critical principle of reading your Bible, okay, this is very important, is context is everything. It's very easy just to cherry pick a verse out and make it say something that it doesn't really say. So what is the context? What is Jesus really talking about when he's saying don't worry about your life? We got to look at the entire passage in its context, okay? Critical deal here. So let's look at where this conversation starts. We got to back it up a few verses. Jesus says, therefore, don't worry about your life. So why is that therefore there? He's saying, because of what I just said, don't worry about your life. So what did he say before that? Let's go back to verse 15. Jesus says this: watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possession. So, okay, the context here is money. It's stuff. It's accumulating resources. Jesus even talks about this idea of greed. And now he goes on to tell a story. These are called parables to illustrate his point. So let's see what Jesus says. And he told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man produced an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. To which we all say, wow, what a nice problem to have, right? This dude's like, I don't have enough room for all this money coming in. It is just raining down on my life. Poor guy, right? We feel really bad for him. Now look what happens. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. This guy just won the game. This guy just achieved what so many of us are striving for: total financial security, complete financial dependence. He doesn't have to worry about a bill. He doesn't have to worry about any cost. This guy is set. You know what this guy should do? Start a podcast, right? Tell us how you did it. Write a book or something, man. This is the dream. This is the absolute dream. And this guy's achieved it. And so he's like, man, I can chill now. Doesn't this sound good? So good? He's like, I'm going to kick my feet up. I'm going to grab a drink and I'm going to chill. To which we all said, in Jesus' name, I wish that would be my life. So this guy's feeling good. And then the story takes a very unexpected turn. But God said to him, "You fool." Uh-oh. This very night, your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? And Jesus concludes saying, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Okay, so Jesus does not seem to have the same hopes and visions of the American dream that we have. Because he does not call this guy a winner. He does not call this guy a success story. He calls him a fool. And you got to really ask the question, why? Why is Jesus calling this guy a fool? Is it his fault that he made some money and he did well for himself and now he can chill? Like, what's so wrong with that? Why is Jesus so hard on this guy? Well, this guy was trying to be his own provider. Jesus says he was storing up for himself. He thought he could be his own source of security in his life. What he tried to do was set his life up to where he didn't need God. And the moment he finally thought he had everything lined up in his life, God showed him how much security he really had. And it's in the context of that story, Jesus says this, "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life." So the purpose of your life is not to slave away for some illusion of financial security. The purpose of your life is not for you to be your own provider. Jesus says your Father already knows your needs. He will give you everything you need. So we got our promise, everybody. That feels pretty good. God's going to take care of you. But what do we just say one of the most important principles of biblical study was? What do you have to do? Look at the context, right? Because we got some more context here. There is a catch. See, what Jesus is saying here is God will provide, but you must be positioned for provision. Okay, follow me here. This is critical. There are conditions to God's provision. And I know already that's probably rubbing some people, and you're like, whoa, hold up, Brian. I thought God was all about love and grace. Like, you put your faith in Jesus, and like it's all covered. It's like, absolutely. You can't earn your salvation. Jesus paid it all. But there are some blessings from God that are conditional. There are things you have to do to access and experience them in your life. So let's go back to the context. What is the context here? Back in Luke 12, Jesus says, don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. Your Father already knows your needs. That sounds great. Now for the condition. Here it is. Seek the kingdom of God first, and you will have everything you need. So we have right here the absolute most critical single condition for you to see the provision of God in your life. And it's this: God must be, what is it, everybody? First. So we have 2 schools that meet here at the church during the week. I love it. Just hundreds of kids all over the place. It's a blast. Hills Academy and Ascent. And at different points in the day, you will see these classes walking around to different parts of the building. And especially for the younger classes in our church that are meeting during the week, as they're walking around, they're in this neat line. There is one role that you get that is like the holy grail of roles for a kid in a class. You guys know what that role is? Oh, you guys know. Isn't it just, it's like winning the lottery for a 5-year-old when you get to be the line leader. And so you see that line leader just leading the whole class around the building, all proud of themselves. But even though there is a line leader for their class, there is always somebody in front of that line leader. And who is it? Every single time. Because that teacher knows the worst thing that could possibly happen is letting a 5-year-old lead 20 other kids around this building randomly, okay? That is not going to work. Somebody has to be first. Order of priority matters. It's actually essential in so many different areas of your life. And God, He wants to show you that He can meet all of your needs, but you have to position yourself properly. So your career can't be first. Your hobbies can't be first. Your marriage and your kids can't be first. Your kids' sports can't be first. Your money can't be first. Your own safety and security cannot be first. God has to be first in your life. It is the only position he will accept. And this is such a critical idea in the Bible. There's actually an Old Testament story that speaks to this perfectly, okay? So I want us to go on this journey together. There's an Old Testament prophet. His name is Elijah. He lived at a horrible moment in human history. There was political corruption going on. There was spiritual and economic devastation happening. People were starving to death. It was so bad. Enemy nations were plundering each other. And Elijah himself, this guy who's serving God, runs out of food and water. So he is now starving himself. And God says, I'm going to take care of you. And so he says, I actually have a widow who's going to get you some food and water. So you start traveling and you'll get to her. So Elijah goes on this little road trip and he comes across this woman. He says, hey, I need you to give me some water and some bread. Can you help a guy out? And now we pick up the story in 1 Kings 17. This is the woman's response. She says, as surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die. It's very hard for us to understand what this woman is going through right here. Can you just imagine what this lady has suffered up to this point? She's lost her husband. She's totally destitute. There is no more money in the bank. There's not even any food. And now she is preparing just to have her last meal with his kids so then they can die together. For a mother, this is the ultimate form of suffering right here. And now this guy has the audacity to ask this woman for some food. I mean, how dare Elijah even ask? Look what he says to her, though. Elijah said, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But, what's the word, everybody? First, make a small loaf of bread for me. Now, the nerve of this guy, right? Are you serious, dude? Are you kidding me? No, like that is not what you say after she says this. He's like, yeah, I know you're about to die, but I'm getting the last Lunchable, okay? So you're going to watch me eat it. What is happening here? Well, understand this fact. Elijah is a prophet at this time, so he literally represents God, okay? This is a critical piece in human history when this was how it worked. And so when he told her to bring food to him, what he was essentially saying is, I need you to trust God. Bring this to God. Trust him in this moment. And Elijah makes a promise. He says, if you will do this first, I promise you, you will see God provide. He's going to come through for you, okay? Don't be afraid. And now look what happens. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. There was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. The jar of flour and the jug of oil were never empty, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. Amen. God provides. Now, this woman was literally on the edge of death. This was her last meal, and God provides for her. He makes a way. But it does lead you to ask the question, why didn't God just rain down food from heaven? Like, why did he let her even get to this type of desperate moment in her life? Why didn't he just solve the problem? Why would he even put her in a position where she terrifyingly has to give up the last little bit of food she has for this guy? Well, God, he didn't do it for him. He did it for her. God did this for the woman. He was trying to show her something. He wanted her to see that she could really trust him to provide every single thing she needed. But God needed her to do something for her to experience that. She had to put God first. He had to be first. It was a necessary requirement for her to see his supernatural provision, even down to her last little penny. And God said, I know it's scary. I know this feels like this is going to be the end, but trust me, you need to get yourself in position for my provision. God knows your needs. He is able to meet every single one of your needs. But there's a key condition. He has to be first. That is the absolute single condition. He must be first in your life, and that's what this woman experienced in her own life. Now, it's true for us. If you want to see God provide in your life, he's got to be first, but that means he's got to be first everywhere. And there's one area of your life where this is particularly true when it comes to God's provision. God must be first in your finances. Must be. This is a key part of the condition. Follow me here. When Elijah asked this woman to put God first, did you notice that he did not say, oh, I get that you're running out of food. You know, all you need to do, just pray. Just read your Bible. You know, you keep going to church, and that's good. That's going to satisfy all the requirements. No. She's like, I have literally nothing left. And he's like, still need you to put him first. You need to have some skin in this game for you to see God's provision in your life. There's a passage in Proverbs 3 in the Bible that says this: honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. So we have a direct command in the Bible. We have this call, if you follow God, to honor him with your wealth. It's very clear. He has to be in his proper position. And then we get introduced to this critical idea, though, that you'll see all throughout the Bible, this idea of first fruits. Now, at this point in time, there were basically only two jobs you could really have if you were living at the time. You were basically a farmer or a shepherd. That's all you were. So crops and livestock were really your forms of income and wealth creation. That's how it worked. And this idea of first fruits, and we're also going to see in a minute, this idea of firstborn, was this practice of bringing the best and first portion of your resources to God as an act of worship and gratitude and also faith. It was a way to position yourself for God's provision. You need to see how much this is just all over the Bible. It's everywhere. All the way back to the first pages, we get introduced to Cain and Abel. Okay, the first kids of Adam and Eve. So human history is just getting started. And look what it says about these guys right here, these two brothers. Genesis 4. Abel took care of the flocks, and Cain became a farmer, right? The two different jobs you could basically have. Later, Cain brought some of his crops as a gift to God. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. Now, this is why this is so important for us to look at. At this moment in history, there's no 10 Commandments yet. There's no law that God has brought down. There's no sacrificial system. There's nothing of that. None of it. These are just the second generation in human history, and Cain brings God a gift. Now, he's doing better than most people, isn't he? It's like, man, he's doing something. But God's like, I am not impressed. I do not want that. And then Abel, he brings a gift too, but it says God accepted it. There's another translation that says God looked with favor on Abel and his offering. Abel got to the next level, but Cain didn't. What happened? What's the difference here? Well, Cain, it says, brought some of what he had to God. See, for Cain, this was about comfort and convenience. He gave what he wanted when he wanted, when it was good for him. Now, Abel, it says, brought the best of the firstborn. He didn't give out of convenience. He gave out of faith and worship. This was a genuine sacrifice because he wouldn't even know if there'd be more livestock to come. It was the first one. And so what Abel showed is that he actually had God first in his life, whereas Cain did not. Now, why is God so particular about this? He seems a little persnickety, doesn't he? It's like, man, God, shouldn't you just be grateful? Don't you own everything? God, don't you know how expensive groceries are? Like, God, do you not understand what it's like trying to live in Colorado? God, do you understand the principle of inflation? Okay, have you figured that one out yet? God doesn't need your money. You need to have God first in your life. And that's what this is about. God is first or he's nothing. He has to be the line leader. That's the only position that works with God in your life. You have to be in the proper position for him to provide. And so God does this for you. He's giving you an opportunity to put him first in your life so then he can prove that he will provide for you. So you have to position yourself. And then you see the provision. Let's go back to Proverbs 3. I want you guys to see this. Look what it says again. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Okay. Then look what happens. Then, here's the condition. Your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. So what's the condition? God has to be first. But if you will put him first, the promise is he will provide. He will take care of you. God is saying, I want to prove to you that you can trust me. I want you to see that I will come through for you. This is the only way you get to the next level. You have to have God first. It's not faith unless it's first. You have to step out and trust God to make a way because he's first or he's nothing. Now, I told you guys this was a message I was really excited about because maybe more than any other single topic, this is one that is very close to my heart. And the reason for that is probably my single greatest struggle in my own faith and life. Really, this is my biggest weak spot. It's that question that I wrestle with all the time. Is there going to be enough? I struggle with that probably more than anything else in my life. I worry about it constantly. And if you do have a struggle in your life, I think probably the best thing you can do is blame it on your childhood. Okay, that's what you should do. And so, when I was growing up, money was tight for our family. Now, I don't want to paint some picture of abject poverty. You know, some people are like, I grew up so poor. It's like, dude, you know how to ski. You did not grow up that poor, okay? So I'm not saying that, but things were very tight. And my sister and I, even from a young age, became painfully aware of what felt like a very precarious financial situation in our family. It always felt like we were on the edge of everything falling apart. And while all of this was going on, while I was growing up, our family was going to church. And my mom would drag me to church, whether I was faking an illness or had a sports game. She did not care. She's like, you're going to church with your soccer uniform. We're going to church. And every single week at church, I would see my mom drop a check into the plate. Now, this is back in the day when you didn't have online giving. Remember these old plates that would get passed around? So I'd be watching her do this. And something you need to know about my mom for context is my mom believed God was first. It's just a conviction she had. There was actually something that she was very committed to, inspired by passages like this in the Bible, Deuteronomy 14. You must set aside a tithe of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring the tithe to the designated place of worship. This idea of a tithe is bringing God our first 10%. It's our best. We give it to him first as an act of worship. This is what overlaps with first fruits and firstborn. And so for my mom, this wasn't about what she wanted or when she wanted. For her, it was God is first. That was her conviction, even with all of our financial challenges. Well, I was in high school. Both my sister and I were close in age, and college was coming up. I still remember the moment my mom sat my sister and I down in my room. She said, hey guys, I just got to be honest with you. There is no money for your college. $0. And so we're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to figure this out. And so I'm already starting to process like college loans and what are we going to do and how's this all going to work? And while my mom was having these conversations with my sister, we were still going to church and she was still dropping those checks in that plate. And I was like, Mom, there is my college fund right there. You keep giving it to this church. So how about we fix that? Well, my sister was the first one up to go on this college journey, and she ends up getting a letter in the mail, and she opens it up one day. And this letter was from this prestigious university here in the country. And the letter says, hey, we would love for you to attend our institution, and we would love to give you a full ride scholarship to attend here. Now, here's what's crazy about this. We thought it was a prank. I'm not kidding. We called the school, like, is this real, or did somebody just mess with us? And my sister ended up getting her undergrad totally covered. Now, it was right after that, then I had to go through this process. And we're doing the whole thing, trying to figure out what to do, looking at all the loans, and I end up getting a phone call from a much less prestigious institution. And this school calls me up. They say, hey, Brian, we would love for you to come to this school, and actually, we would love to give you a full ride scholarship as well. And so both my sister and I ended up going to undergrad. Every single penny was covered. 2 years later, my sister's after her undergrad, she starts looking at grad schools. Grad school calls her up and says, hey, not only will we pay for all of your education, we are going to pay you to attend this school. My sister made money while going to grad school. And then shortly after that, I was looking at grad schools, and I get a call from the school. They say, hey, Brian, there's actually a businessman who wants to invest in the next generation of pastors, and he is going to pay for every single one of your seminary expenses. $400,000 of college education, totally paid for. Every dorm, every book, every class. And I know some of you guys hear that and you think, well, good for you, Brian, because I'm still paying off my college loans right now. I hope you feel good about that. Now hear me. God provides in many different ways, but you need to understand, even in the face of very real financial stress and struggle, my mom put God first. She believed to the core of her soul that he was going to provide. And the way my mom provided for my sister and I was not by hoarding, was not just by giving what she wanted when she wanted. It was by putting God first. And by doing that, she positioned my sister and I for supernatural provision from God. Is God first in your life? Is he the absolute priority? Is he your provider? Or do you just follow him out of comfort and convenience when it works for you? Here's what I know. The way you will know is if you really trust him, even down to your money. You trust him to provide. You believe he can meet your needs more than your job. You believe he can meet your needs more than your 401k or your investments or your businesses. Are you rich toward God, or are you storing up for yourself? You know why so many people have no stories of God's provision and power in their lives? It's because they have not gone to the next level. And God is not really their provider. They are. And God's not actually first. Now, I'll tell you guys, even with all these experiences, and I have other stories like that too, of God's provision in my life, can I be honest with you? I still struggle. This is still my greatest single struggle probably in my faith. Is God going to provide? Even though Jesus tells me not to worry about my life, you know what I do? I worry about my life all the time. And now even at this stage of my life, you know what the questions are that spin through my mind all the time? I wonder, are Nicole and I even going to be able to retire? Are we even going to be able to afford Colorado with this trajectory that it's on? And now that I have kids, can I tell you guys, my worries are at a whole nother level right now. Because I'm like, who cares about me? What about these kids? How am I going to help these kids with college? How am I going to be able to pay for the experiences and opportunities that they need to be successful in their lives? And you know what I've wrestled with many times before? I have really wrestled with, is the giving and generosity that Nicole and I are living with actually hurting my kids' future potential? Because that's money that I can't give to my kids and help them with. There is a psalm in the Bible. This is one of the most important Bible verses in my entire life. And it's actually written by David. He says this in Psalm 37. He says, I was young and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging for bread. I will tell you guys right now, tithing and giving and being generous, it's a very hard thing for me sometimes. Because I wrestle, I'm like, God, I want you to be first. And I'm trusting you, but I need you to show me that this verse is true. I need you to show me that you're not going to forsake me. And more importantly, I need you to show me that you're going to take care of these kids. Because there are things I can't do for them. There are things I cannot provide. And so that is something I just wrestle with all the time. And at the top of the month, this is just my practice. Nicole and I get paid monthly. I sit down, I do our budget, and then I'll do our tithe. I'll do the first 10% goes right to God. It's the first thing we give through this church. Nicole and I want to lead out in that way. And many times when I do it, I did this just yesterday. I'll sit down and I'll read that psalm. I'll say, God, you said you will never forsake somebody who's trusting you, putting you first. And you promise you'll take care of their kids. I need you to show me that this verse is true. I literally did this yesterday. And there was one particular time I was doing this. This was a couple months ago. I'm sitting at my computer, getting ready to do this, getting the budget, getting ready to do our giving. And my daughter, Brinley, comes in. Now, this girl has me wrapped around her finger, everybody. She just turned 6. She's my little princess. She sits on my lap. She's getting all cuddly on me. And she's like, Dad, what are you doing? Now, in that moment, I could have just been real, just simple. Oh, Daddy's just on his computer. He's getting some work done. And then I'll got to hop off and we can play. But see, she was asking a loaded question because of what I was doing in that moment, because I didn't just want to tell her, oh, we're just giving to the church. I'm just taking care of the bills. No, because for me, this is not some obligation. This is not some legalistic ritual. This is a deeply personal act of worship and trust in God for me. Look at some of these verses. Colossians 1, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. 1 Corinthians, but Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the firstfruits of all who have died. Look what Paul says in Romans 8. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Do you see what this is saying? God gave his first and his best for you. Jesus was God's firstborn. Jesus is God's first fruits. He is God in the flesh. Do you see what this is saying? God put you first. God put you before himself. So much so that he went to a cross for you and died for you. He went first. And now we have this promise of eternal life, of resurrection, because God put you first. He gave his firstborn for you. He gave his first and his best. Jesus gave everything for you. And so you see, guys, when we give to God, it is not some legalistic church thing. It's an overflowing act of worship and gratitude to this good news of Jesus and this power of God in our lives. And so when I talked to my daughter and I sat with her on my lap, I said, oh, honey, Daddy's tithing right now. You see, we give God our first and our best because, honey, you need to know, God gave everything for us. Jesus died for us. He loves you so much. He would do anything for you. And we give because we trust that God's going to take care of our family. You know God meets all of our needs, honey. God's our provider. And as I'm having this little conversation with her, I can tell it's starting to click. She's having this revelation moment. She looks up at me and she says, Dad, do you want to play Barbies? So I'm like, okay, maybe in a couple of years. But very soon after that, Brinley, my daughter, she comes in to Nicole's and I's room and she hands us a card. It says, I love you, Mommy and Daddy. And in this card, she has a quarter and a nickel taped into it. She taped a quarter and a nickel in it. And I was like, honey, what are you doing? Why did you tape money in here? She said, oh, well, Daddy, I want to give like God gives. And I want to be generous like you and Mommy are generous. You know what I want more than being able to afford my kids' activities and sports? You know what I want more than being able to pay for my kids' college? I want my kids to see that God provides. I want to give my kids the same stories that my mom gave me. And I want my kids to live at the next level. So New Hills, I just have a question for you. Are you your provider, or is God? Are you storing up for yourself, chasing security? Or are you rich toward God? Is God first? Because God says, if you will put me first, I promise you, I will meet every single need that comes your way. you will see my work in your life. You will see my miraculous provision. I will take care of you. But I have to be first.